Officer, this is fast becoming First Minister's apologies. Apologies for losing our tax-varying powers, apologies for losing our money in dodgy loans, and this week, the Transport Minister's apology for losing the plot and leaving hundreds of Scots stranded in their cars overnight. So would the First Minister now apologise to Scotland for his government's incompetent response to Monday's severe weather?
First Minister.
Well, I see that Ian Gray is now stealing David McCletch's lines from yesterday. And if Ian Gray, of course, had felt, as the rest of Scotland did, that the weather last week was worthy of his questions, then he would ask the questions last week. But very precisely, I believe the Scottish Government should have done much better in terms of the information flow last Monday to people, our citizens, who were caught in the extraordinary conditions. The Transport Minister apologised for that. I follow his apology. We should have done much better in the information flow to help our fellow citizens who are in a position of extremity, and improvements in that will be made by this government.
Ian Gray.
To be honest, Presiding Officer, even I, last week, couldn't have foreseen the degree of incompetence demonstrated by the Scottish Government this week. And, you know, this is not just a problem about information flow. It's about the Minister's incompetent response. Why was nothing done to stop more traffic joining motorways already blocked? Why were motorways not closed sooner to get them cleared? Why at 4:30 p.m. was the Minister saying roads were clearing when they were not? Why was there no emergency meeting until 9 p.m. when some people had already been stuck for 12 hours? Why did it take until 11:15 at night to announce a helpline number, do it on television, and then get the number wrong anyway? And above all, why is Mr Stevenson still the Transport Minister?
First Minister.
Well, if I could just correct Ian Gray, I heard him in a statement, I saw a statement of his where he said that the contingency cabinet committee didn't meet until the evening of Monday. That's not true. As was said during the statement yesterday, if he'd been listening, that was the second meeting of the day on Monday. And I just say, if Ian Gray is going to complain about people getting their facts wrong, then he should at least pay some attention to his own questions and his own ability to summon the most simple facts to bring along. Now, he said he didn't anticipate. Yeah, exactly. Perhaps Ian Gray, even the great Gray, didn't anticipate the extraordinary combination of weather conditions that people in central Scotland endured last Monday. He asked about the closure of motorways. Even Ian Gray should know that these are police operational matters. And Strathclyde... Well, I'm sorry. If Ian Gray actually believes that it should be a Cabinet subcommittee decision to close the motorways or manage the road service around Scotland, these are the matters for Transport Scotland and our police authorities. And incidentally, under the most trying circumstances, they've done an extraordinary job. At some point, this chamber will have to recognise that what fell on central Scotland last Monday morning was an extraordinary event of weather conditions, that thousands of people were affected, and were affected very seriously indeed. But thousands of people, public services, emergency services, volunteered, did their absolute best to help their fellow citizen. And among this political argy-bargy, let's try and unite in thanking those who helped their fellow citizens.
Ian Gray.
Well, for 3 days, the First Minister and the Transport Minister have tried to blame the Met Office. They are now, it would appear, blaming the police for the decisions that were taken. Frankly... Frankly, the people of Scotland expect greater leadership from their government. Last week, Alex Salmond was praising the Sun newspaper's coverage of the weather. Well, what are they saying this week? The Transport Minister turned incompetence into an art form. And as for the First Minister, it's his total failure to show any kind of leadership in a crisis that will be remembered long after the snows have melted. It is clear that hundreds of Scots stuck in their cars, the hundreds of thousands whose lives were disrupted, and the national media en masse have lost confidence in this Transport Minister. Does the First Minister really still have confidence in him?
First Minister.
I have full confidence in Stuart Stevenson as Transport Minister. And just for the record and correction, I did not criticise the police service in Scotland. I was admiring their dedication and commitment, which just occasionally should be acknowledged by Ian Gray.
Order.
And when they deployed more than 1,000 extra officers to help people in their extremity, it's a good job there are more than 1,000 extra officers in Scotland to be deployed. At some point, Ian Gray will have to acknowledge that the occurrence last Monday was an extraordinary weather combination. Yes, we'll learn lessons on communications and other things, but if Ian Gray's platform in seeking election is he's going to have control over the elements and the weather, then even Ian Gray and his band behind him are going to find it difficult to sell that message to any serious person in Scotland.
Ian Gray.
Of course, the weather last Monday was extraordinary, but what was also extraordinary was the incompetence of the response from this government and their Transport Minister. And I say to the First Minister, as the apologies mount week by week, there has to be a point where he realises that standing by incompetent ministers is not a show of strength, it is a sign of weakness. Back to those editorials that he loves so much to read out, the Daily Record. They lurch from crisis to crisis. They lurch from crisis to crisis.
Order.
The look of an administration in terminal decline. And as for platforms in May, I tell him this. If I was First Minister and the Transport Minister proved as incompetent as this, I would sack him. What on earth do you have to do to get the sack in Alex Salmond's apology for a government?
First Minister.
Well,
Order.
The other aspect which was notable, apart from Ian Gray's ability to forecast the elements, it was the total inability to come forward with a single constructive suggestion which will assist this country's resilience. So let me offer Ian Gray some of the things that are being done. That people are working today in Scotland as we recover from the disruption to our transport services to make sure that fuel supplies are accessible, that the tankers are indeed rolling out of Grangemouth, that people are being refilled. We're still going to have difficulties, but as Ian Gray is talking politics, people are talking sense across Scotland and acting to restore this country's infrastructure and economy. I also believe that if we just got one suggestion from what the general public are talking about, like the issue of snow tyres, we have already been in contact with the Department of Transport with regard to HGV vehicles. If Ian Gray would care to have a glance at the traffic disruption in Scotland, he will find the vast majority of it is on HGVs jackknifing across key points in the transport infrastructure. Now, it may be some time.
Order.
It may be some time. Well, of course, constructive, positive suggestions to improve things are not the lot of the Labour Party. But with the Department of Transport, who have that reserved power at the present moment, then perhaps we can bring about an improvement as that ability to handle this winter extreme weather becomes more pertinent throughout our economy. Now, if people across Scotland are taking action, both volunteering to help their neighbours, if our police force and emergency service are taking action to deal with extreme weather conditions, is it too much at one stage that opposition parties will recognise the efforts that I was recognising from the Sun newspaper last week bring forward some intelligent, constructive suggestions, and just for once, think of the interests of the Scottish people in dealing with these national emergencies.